Is The Lion King 1994 a Christian film? This is a question I have thought about for quite a while now. While I don't think it was made as a Christian film, as a Christian who also happens to be a Lion King fan, I believe there are some similarities in plot points and themes between the movie and the Bible. Besides, people have spoken at length about the similarities between Lion King and Shakespeare's Hamlet, so I thought it'd be nice to see a different set of connections. My main inspiration for this are these guys' videos. If they can say that The Lord of the Rings has Christian themes in it, so can I about The Lion King. By the way, I'm on my way to becoming a proper Lord of the Rings fan as well, so maybe I might make a stop motion movie or something out of it at some point. Purely hypothetical. I also want to assure you that I'm still working on the Lion King 2 musical comic. I just got sidetracked by a whole bunch of other things, and hopefully I'll be able to get my stuff together soon because I'm really excited to share part 5 with you. Here's a mild spoiler. You will see Kovu and Kiara as teenagers for the first time here, and it will be lots of fun. With that, let's get back to this video. Now, on to the first set of similarities. According to the filmmakers themselves, there are connections between the Lion King story and the Old Testament, the first part of the Bible. According to Don Hahn, the producer for the 1994 film, the story was inspired by the stories of Joseph and Moses from the Old Testament. You can find Joseph's story in the book of Genesis, chapters 37 to 50. You can find Moses' story from the books of Exodus to Deuteronomy. Moses is also considered the author of the first 5 books of the Old Testament, which are Genesis to Deuteronomy. The stories of Joseph and Moses both involve the following plot points. Number 1, a young man going into some kind of exile. 2, personal growth and development in the foreign environment to which they are exiled. 3. The eventual return and reunion of the young man with his family and the restoration of his community's well-being. In the case of Joseph, the specific similarities that I noticed would be the following. Joseph and his father Jacob, also known as Israel, are very close, similar to the relationship between Simba and Mufasa. Joseph has 10 older brothers who are jealous of him. Simba is envied by his father's brother Scar. An attempt is made on Joseph's life by his 10 older brothers. He is thrown down a dry well. Simba was supposed to die in the wildebeest stampede but survives. As a result, in Joseph's case, his brothers pull him out of the well and sell him to Ishmaelite traders as a slave. Scar finds Simba weeping beside Mufasa's corpse and makes Simba run away after convincing the little cub that he is the one responsible for Mufasa's death. What a scumbag. Joseph's brothers tear up Joseph's colorful coat, a gift from his father Jacob, and put goat's blood on it to trick him into thinking Joseph got eaten by a wild animal. Similarly, Scar lies to Sarabi, who is Mufasa's wife and Simba's mother, and the lionesses about Simba's death in the stampede. Jacob and his family experience a famine while living in Canaan. The lionesses of the Pride Lands suffer through a drought during Scar's reign and Simba's absence. Joseph later becomes steward of Egypt, essentially the prime minister, and saves the land from suffering during the famine. He then brings his whole family to live with him there after he reveals himself to his brothers. Similarly, Simba goes through a painful emotional journey while living in the jungle and then returns home, reveals himself to Scar and confronts him. His return brings back balance to the land and joy to his family. Just as there are 6 similarities between The Lion King and the story of Joseph, in the case of Moses, there are also 6 similarities, and they are the following. Moses goes into exile in the desert because of a murder. So does Simba. Moses grows up living in obscurity among a tribe of Midianites. Simba grows up with Timon and Pumbaa, who have no idea that Simba is actually the prince of the Pride Lands. Simba tries to escape his responsibilities by living the Hakuna Matata lifestyle. Moses experiences a vision of God, the burning bush incident, one of the most iconic scenes from the Bible. Simba has a similar experience when Rafiki shows him a vision of Mufasa in the sky. Moses doubts his ability to lead his people to freedom, to which God responds with words of encouragement and assurance, promising Moses that he will be with him. Simba asks, "How can I go back? I'm not who I used to be." To which Mufasa responds, "Remember who you are. You are my son and the one true king." The Pharaoh puts Moses' people under heavy bondage as slaves, mistreating them and forcing them to build cities but refusing to provide them with proper material to make bricks. Scar neglects his duty as king and allows the hyenas to take over the Pride Lands and basically strip the land of all the greenery and animals, and then blames the lionesses for not going hunting. Moses, according to God's command, goes back to Egypt and confronts Pharaoh, demanding that he set the people of Israel free from bondage. Simba, emboldened by his father's vision, goes back to the Pride Lands and confronts Scar, telling him to step down from the throne. I once heard someone I know say that a preacher mentioned the similarities between Lion King and Joseph and Moses stories. He thought it was ridiculous and laughed. But now that I actually took the time to think about all this, I realized not only that the preacher had a source for this, but the similarities are actually pretty legitimate. Now that we have covered the similarities between the Lion King and the Old Testament, let's see some connections between the Lion King and the New Testament, which talks about Jesus and the apostles. You can find Jesus' story told in the first 4 books of the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The first chapter of the book of the Acts of the Apostles describes Jesus' ascension to heaven. For this, I will focus more on the characters rather than the plot itself. The characters I want to bring to focus are the 3 main lions of the story: Mufasa, Simba, and Scar. Scar is very similar to Satan. In fact, in 1 Peter 5 verse 8, St. Peter literally compares Satan to a roaring lion who is looking for someone to devour. Satan's behavior towards people like Adam and Eve, Job, and Jesus himself is very reminiscent of Scar's manipulation of Simba. Satan attacks people's insecurities and exploits their weaknesses, tempting them to sin. Satan also seeks to become God, just like how Scar seeks to become king instead of his brother and nephew. Scar goes to great lengths to ensure his victory, using his cunning to orchestrate both Simba's visit to the elephant graveyard and then the wildebeest stampede. He also bribes the hyenas with food, similar to how Satan promises pleasure and comfort via sin. However, as both the Bible and Professor Tolkien's works imply, evil is not able to create anything new. It can only distort and destroy what has been invented or made by the forces of good. Hence, we can be hopeful that just how Scar's own lies and deceit came to destroy him in the end, Satan's own wickedness and scheming will ultimately destroy him. Now, what I am about to say about Mufasa and Simba might seem a bit unbelievable for some people, because in typical online discussions, I have seen folks compare Mufasa to God the Father and Simba to God the Son, Jesus Christ. I'd like to push back against this comparison and say Mufasa can be seen as Jesus Christ, while Simba can be seen as the Christian believer, someone who loves and follows Jesus rather than Jesus himself. Mufasa can easily be seen as similar to God, or specifically Jesus Christ, God the Son. Mufasa is a wise and loving character who adores Simba and is willing to give his life to save Simba. These aspects of Mufasa's character seem extremely similar to Jesus Christ, as the Gospels record his teachings, many of which form the foundation of modern Western society as we know it today, to the point where some of Jesus' sayings have become part of the English language itself, such as the blind leading the blind, do to others what you would have them do to you, also known as the Golden Rule, or the dictum, judge not, lest you be judged. Jesus' words continue to have great influence on human thought and philosophy, unlike any other individual before or since. One of Jesus' parables, the prodigal son, itself has some similarities to the story of Simba. A son goes estranged from his father, wastes his time doing nothing of worth until he gains clarity and returns to his father's house. Additionally, the fact that Mufasa dies saving Simba is also similar to the story of Christ's Passion, how Jesus suffered and died to save human beings from their sin. Mufasa's return in the clouds is also somewhat similar to Jesus' own second coming, of which he himself has prophesied, describing his return as coming with the clouds of heaven. A key difference, though, between Mufasa and Jesus would be that Mufasa remains dead and appears as a spirit, which probably is inspired by the belief in ancestral spirits by various African cultures and does not return in bodily form like Jesus did. Jesus resurrected as a fully conscious being with a physical body that cannot experience death and disease. So, it's a misrepresentation of Christianity when it is claimed that Christians worship a zombie. Most Christians probably don't even know what that means. Why I say that Simba is actually a representative of the Christian believer rather than Jesus is because of the nature of Simba's journey. Simba is shown as imperfect and immature, neither of which is true of Mufasa or God. Simba also wallows in self-blame and refuses to confront his past out of shame, choosing to trust his own failures rather than gain confidence in the goodness of his father and family. Consequently, Simba needs a burning bush experience to remind him who he really is and what his commitment to his family and community is. None of these things are true in the case of Jesus Christ. Jesus knew right from when he was a young boy that he had come to save sinners and establish God's church. Jesus needed no burning bush moment to restore his confidence. He never experienced any sort of self-doubt or blamed himself for anything that went wrong in his ministry. The closest thing you can say to this would be the agony in Gethsemane, but even that was more likely the result of Jesus' righteous sorrow against sin rather than any fear or apprehension he had of the cross. Jesus himself predicted his death numerous times prior to the actual event, so he knew that he had to die and what exactly that meant. You could see this more clearly perhaps if I compared Simba to Simon Peter. During Jesus' ministry, Peter often acted as the spokesperson for the disciples and was the most enthusiastic and passionate of all the 12. Similarly, Simba is very excited about his future role as king and is eager to be like his father, which leads to the elephant graveyard incident. However, when Jesus was arrested, the disciples were all scattered and went into hiding. During Jesus' trial before the high priest, though, Peter snuck up behind the crowd that took Jesus away, and when the soldiers and servants at the high priest's house recognized him, he denied knowing Jesus 3 times, something Jesus himself had predicted. When Peter realized what he had done, he wept bitterly and felt tremendous sorrow and shame. This is a bit similar to what happened when Mufasa died. Thanks to Scar's manipulation, in Simba's mind, he was the one responsible for his father's death. He might have probably thought that the big roar he tried to make in the gorge led to the wildebeest stampede, which in turn led to his father having to come and save him, which finally led to Mufasa's death. Scar's words might have really tightened this connection. Simba also probably thought of how he went into the elephant graveyard and almost got eaten by the hyenas before Mufasa could come to rescue him. All of this shame and regret can be a terrible burden on a young child, so it's really no wonder why Simba wanted to forget about all of this and just live with Timon and Pumbaa in the jungle forever. However, after Jesus rose again from the dead, he had a conversation with Peter where he made Peter confess that he loved Jesus 3 times, sort of as compensation for the 3 denials. With this, Jesus showed that he had forgiven Peter. In a similar fashion, when Mufasa appeared to Simba and spoke to him, the vision helped Simba gain clarity and regain his sense of responsibility and duty, which led to his return to Pride Rock. I also see a connection between the function of the church and the characters of Nala and Rafiki. If Simba is the Christian going through some sort of suffering, then we can say that Nala and Rafiki, who are loyal to Mufasa and want to help Simba reclaim the throne, are similar to the community of Christian believers called the Church, whose duty it is to strengthen and support each other by reaching out to them and helping them however they can. What we all can possibly see from this is that The Lion King, if viewed from a biblical lens, is a great representation of the epic journey that is the Christian life. At the beginning, we may be enthusiastic about our future, all eager to get our lives going, happy to follow Jesus. However, a great tragedy may hit us unexpectedly and make us falter. We may then go through a period where we feel responsible for what happened and blame ourselves for the things that really were not in our control. It is in that moment when the love of the Lord Jesus Christ, or additionally our family and friends, can inspire us to rise above the shame and guilt and take up our responsibility and be a productive member of our community. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life which God has promised to those who love him. James 1 verse 12.